There we go. Okay, now I'll share my screen again and we can get started. Okay. Well, thank you. I know most of you on the webinar, some of you I do not. So I'm Carrie Hill. I work for Panorama Environmental, and we focus on NEPA and CEQA projects, but really kind of shepherd projects through the federal or state or whatever permitting process, whatever it happens to be, from cradle to grave, really, and just provide a overall project management for lots of utility scale projects. And I am a Idaho native, and I went to University of Idaho and studied water resources under environmental science degree, and then worked for Idaho Rural Water Association, traveling around visiting very rural water and sewer systems, public water and sewer systems, and then eventually just morphed into kind of being like a water consultant. And even my husband will be, I said something the other day about like what I do, and he goes, I still don't even know what you do. And it's kind of hard to explain to people because they don't really have this cut and dry position, but really I help projects get done. And so I find I'm not the smartest person in the room. I find the smartest people and get them together. And so that's kind of how it came to be on what I'm talking about today, because I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving any kind of legal advice. I actually had that in the title for a minute, and I was like, I probably shouldn't have anything to do with like legal anything in there. But I do work on a team with a water rights attorney and engineer, and he's an engineer and a geologist for Elmore County. They're a three-person volunteer part-time board, and well, they're not volunteer; they're paid a tiny bit, but they have a huge county with a lot of things going on in it, and so they've hired us to kind of run with their water issues, and that's where this economic study that we're going to talk about today is focused on. But the results of that economic study is kind of one of the first done, is having ripple effects. And I think it's really important to kind of understand the economics behind water calls and what water calls are. So today we're just going to start really basic on what is a water right and what is a water call and how does this all work. We'll jump into it. So first off, before we can understand the economic impact of water calls, we really need to cover how water rights work in Idaho. A water right is essentially a legal permission to use a certain amount of water for a specific purpose. So whether that's farming, municipal use, like for a public water system, manufacturing, or even hydropower. The system we use in Idaho is based on what we call the prior appropriation doctrine. You can think of that. You probably heard this before at some point, first in line, first in right. It means that a person or entity that claimed that water first, so say in 1910, they have a higher legal priority than someone who started using it in 1950. So if there's not enough water to go around, the senior users, the 1910, get their full allocation first, and the junior user, which would be the 1950, might be curtailed. So in context of water rights, curtailed means water user is legally ordered to stop or reduce water use. And that's because a senior water right needs to be satisfied. So that is the foundational principle in water law in Idaho and in the West generally, and it becomes very real in dry years or when aquifers are overdrawn, which is what we're going to talk about in our scenario today. So how do you actually get a water right in Idaho? First of all water in Idaho is technically public, so it belongs to the people of the state. But if you want to use it, you need permission from the Department of Water Resources, or IDWR. The process starts when an applicant, so a farmer, developer, a city, a business, they'll file an application with IDWR and they say, I'd like to divert this much water from this source for this reason, this purpose. And if the request is reasonable and doesn't harm existing water rights and the water is available, IDWR will likely approve it, and it'll assign a priority date. And that date becomes your place in line. It's important because in times when there's a shortage, the older or senior water rights are protected before the newer junior ones. It's not automatic that you get your water right. You have to actually use the water. So Idaho also follows a use it or lose it policy. If you don't put the water to beneficial use, like irrigation, domestic supply, manufacturing, you risk losing it. But once you've built the infrastructure, you have the water used as proposed, IDWR will inspect that and say, yep, and then you'll issue your formal license. And at that point, you have a fully established water right. So you can't, what that does is protects water rights from just being bought up and held and hoarded in the state. So let's say you're a farmer, the water right from 1950, and you're not getting enough water because someone upstream with a newer water right is pumping or diverting too much. What can you do? In Idaho, you can file something called a delivery call. It's also known as a water call. With the Idaho Department of Water Resources, this basically is a legal request saying, hey, I'm a senior water right holder. I'm not getting what I'm entitled to. And then IDWR will investigate. And if they find that your claim is valid as your senior right isn't being met and that junior users are interfering, they'll take action. That often means curtailing junior water users. So in other words, those newer users are ordered to reduce or stop using water so the senior water right can be fulfilled. This is how the first in time, first in right doctrine is enforced. It's not just a theory, and it happened recently in Idaho. We saw a major delivery call on the Eastern Snake River Plain just last year. This system is designed to protect older, legally established water rights, but that can have huge ripple effects, especially in areas where water is over-allocated or in times of drought. So to show how serious water calls can be, let's look at this very real example. In 2024, the Surface Water Coalition is their group of irrigation districts holding senior water rights. They filed a delivery call on the Eastern Snake River Plain aquifer. The Eastern Snake River Plain, very famous aquifer, runs from East Idaho all the way really down towards on the edge of kind of the Mountain Home, the other side of the Mountain Home area, where we're starting to run into what we call the Western Snake River Plain aquifer, but it covers the majority of the Snake River Plain. Millions of acres are irrigated off of it, and it produces billions of dollars of economic output a year. So it was a big deal. The Surface Water Coalition actually threatened to make this water call. They tried to have meetings in between, and they just couldn't get what they wanted, couldn't get those junior water right users to the table. And so they finally just did the formal water right call, delivery call. The Idaho Department of Water Resources investigated, they agreed. So in May, IDWR issued an order that would have curtailed 74,000 acre feet of junior water rights. So anything after March 31st of 1954. You can imagine the growth that we have seen on the Eastern Snake River Plain, even in ag, from 1954 to now. That was a lot. It was hundreds of farms across the region disrupting irrigation right as folks were getting ready to, a lot of them had planted fields. They've made their investment in the year, disrupted irrigation and forced many to just fallow fields, shut down operations. The economic fallout was huge. Models suggested that losses could have easily exceeded $750 million just in 2024. And that's ripple effects on jobs and equipment suppliers and food processors, just goes on and on. So luckily, the last minute, it was all over the news, so I'd be shocked if there was anybody on this call who hadn't heard of it. Scott Bedke, the lieutenant governor, was very involved in this. And the director of Department of Water Resources, they were personally involved in these meetings, held a lot of meetings back and forth, a lot of meetings with attorneys. And I heard Scott Bedke give a talk one time about, he said, finally, they got the attorneys out of the room and they came to a solution. But they did avert at the last minute, came to an agreement, struck a deal, and it involved a plan that conserved 240,000 acre feet of groundwater and delivering 50,000 acre feet of stored surface water. So they're real legal tools that can disrupt local economies, state economies, when water is over-appropriated. And so really we're in this position because water has been over-appropriated throughout Idaho. Over-appropriated meaning more paper water rights have been given out to people than there is physical water in the ground. So let's talk about over-appropriation. When an area is over-appropriated, so like I said, there's more legal water, paper water rights than actual water available in reality, especially in dry years. These areas might function in wet years, but during drought or overuse, there's just not enough to meet everybody's rights. So when one user gets water, it automatically means someone else won't. And with that first in time, first in right, the junior users lose out. Over-appropriation leads to legal disputes, water calls like we saw on the Eastern Snake Plain, and just very serious economic consequences. So this is unfortunately the exact situation that we are on the verge of in multiple areas of Idaho. And like I mentioned, I'll focus on Elmore County today, as I've done a lot of work with them to try to get ahead of this situation and avoid a water call. It's a looming factor that no one wants to get to. So the mountain home area of Elmore County has a declining aquifer, and the region depends heavily on that aquifer that underlines, it's generally referred to as the mountain home plateau, but it's like a large, gently sloping lake of that whole area, and it gently slopes to the Snake River. The groundwater is being pumped at nearly twice what it can recharge. We're estimating that about 80,000 acre feet a year is being pumped, and only 40,000 acre feet a year is being recharged. So you can think of like drawing down on a savings account that'll eventually run dry. You know, you can't keep taking 80,000 acre feet out of your bank account and putting 40,000 acre feet back in. And the water isn't just for irrigation. Every single drop of water, or every single drop of drinking water in the region, comes from the ground. There is no surface water in that mountain home region for drinking water. There's no surface water treatment plants. And Glenn's Ferry is in Elmore County. They're kind of over a little divide in a different watershed. They do have a surface water plant, have drinking water from surface water on the Snake River, but the mountain home area in that region, so basically mountain home, stretches all the way towards the Boise stage stop is the edge of Ada and Elmore County. Essentially, everybody's on groundwater. The city of Mountain Home, that's water for homes and businesses, all the private well owners and subdivisions in the region, and the Mountain Home Air Force Base is on the same aquifer. And because it's over-appropriated, the deficit just continues. The region is just prime for a future delivery call, like the Eastern Snake Plain. If that happens, the juniors will be curtailed, and it doesn't have to be limited to just ag users. This is something that we have seen in other areas where municipal users are also at risk. So the city of Mountain Home is at risk, and about half of the city's water rights are 1970 and later. And I'll talk about this in a minute, but 1970s are kind of a key turning point in the region for water rights. So if there was a curtailment to happen, it would likely be those 1970s and later that would be in jeopardy. So that would significantly impact the city and growth, and as you can imagine, just all kinds of things. So as we'll see in these next slides, the economic consequences are just severe. I want to reflect back real fast. I mentioned the 1970s being important. So the area of Mountain Home it's not new that they have no water. If you've driven through there, it's in the middle of the desert. It was established because the railroad went through there and not water. So from 1905 to 1970s, there were 14 different ideas proposed, mostly at the federal level, on how to get water to Mountain Home. This included crazy stuff, simple stuff, pulling from the Snake River, pulling from the Boise Project, which I'll show some graphics of, is the three reservoir system from Arrow Rock, Anderson, and Lucky Peak. It pulls the Boise River. The Boise River starts in Mountain Home. Even drilling a tunnel through the Sawtooth to bring water down from Stanley. I mean, it was all kinds of things have been looked at. And twice reclamation withdrew thousands of acres out there from federal ownership for personal or for public settlement, but just nothing ever came to fruition. So that 1970s date is pretty important. In the 70s, we saw a shift where they were looking at before the 70s, how can we bring surface water to the area? And like I mentioned, those 14 different proposals, nothing ever came to fruition. And they finally said, okay, forget it. Let's just drill. Let's start drilling wells. And the well drilling technology had kind of morphed at that time too. And so the state just started issuing permits and giving out groundwater permits and over-appropriated the basin. So in the 80s, and it happened fast. They recognized an issue fast because in the 80s, they designated the groundwater management area, the Mountain Home groundwater management area that you see there in the hatched. And then the red is the Cinder Cone Butte critical groundwater management area, where we see aquifer declines in the 5 foot per year range. Near Mountain Home, we'll see 1.5 to 2, maybe 3. Towards the Ada Elmore border, where I don't know if anybody's driven on 84 recently, there's a new development at Mayfield Springs there by the Boise Stage Stop, and kind of where the recent news came of the Shopai Casino proposal. That's all on that Ada Elmore border. That area is a little bit better off and they get a little more recharge, but areas even at the base, we're seeing 1.5 to 3 feet drop per year. So it happened fast. And then here we are. I want to just briefly talk about how water works in this area. We have some unique situations. So we have the Trinity Mountains and all this huge mountain range out here. We have Anderson, Little Camas Reservoir up here in Elmore County. Part of Arrow Rock is in Elmore County and Lucky Peak. And so this 3 reservoir system makes up the Boise River, and it collects water from this huge watershed behind it and those white peaks that we see staying white all year round. This little red area is the Bennett Mountains, and the Bennett Mountains right there is the watershed for Elmore County. The only water that the county gets goes from the Bennett Mountains into Little Camas Reservoir, and then down. Oh, they get a little bit, sorry, from this front here, but not much. We have the Snake River down there, and this is a canal and creek system. This 120-year-old canal was dug by Chinese miners and put in by sheep herders and Basque farmers. This canal is leaky and brings water into the Mountain Home area, and really is the only reason that area is sustained at all at this point. And then on this front side here, this water kind of comes down and goes down a creek and goes out of the area. So they don't even get anything from the front side of those mountains. So it's just really, really limited. Probably a really bad place to build a town. What the county's doing to combat this is to bring surface water in. And so I just wanted to quickly highlight, there's a couple proposals to bring water up right here from Anderson. Can you guys see my mouse? Hopefully you can. You can bring up from Anderson into Little Camas, then it'll come down that same canal system to some really successful existing recharge sites. The county, state, Simplot, ITD have all, and a private landowner, have some gravel pits out here that they recharge in anywhere from 2 to 4,000 acre feet a year when there's extra water come down Canyon Creek. But like I said, if you're losing $40,000 a year and someone gives you 2 to 4,000, it's not really keeping up. But that would help bring water down on a year-round basis to do year-round recharge. And then there's a proposal to do a pump station and pipeline from down here on Highway 51 at the Love Ridge Bridge. And the county is right on the verge of getting a 20 CFS water right. And they're probably going to go for more, which would pump water up the highway here towards Mountain Home, put some laterals off, and it would convert these surface water users out here to groundwater, which essentially is recharge. The best kind of recharge is to keep it in the ground and make more water available. So the state and the Air Force have also put in tens of millions of dollars into a pump station and pipeline. Same concept that we would do over, that's highlighted here. They have a pump station and pipeline and surface water treatment plant that they're building to sustain the base, but all the water, like I mentioned, it's a big lake out here and it's huge aquifer, and it all goes towards the Snake River. So the pump station and pipeline, while it sustains the base, it really doesn't keep much water in the area that will be used up kind of upstream towards Mountain Home. And more is needed to just protect not only that investment they're made here, but the investment in Mountain Home and how important it is. So, okay, so that's kind of the history. I needed to give a well-rounded history of how we are in this situation in Mountain Home, and how we got in this spot is important to understand the economy. So a water call and curtailment, if it hits the Mountain Home area, Elmore County wanted to know, what does that look like? They commissioned an economic study to be completed, and it used a custom-built economic model that simulated how the region's economy would interact with the water availability. The economic model combines local groundwater and surface water data with economic data from a system called IMPLAN, which is a national economic modeling system that maps industry inputs and outputs. And it simulates what would happen when water use is reduced, like in a delivery call scenario, or new water supplies are developed, like pumping from the Snake River or bringing from Anderson Ranch. And the model forecasts all the way through 2050 and tracks total economic output, so how much the money the county generates, employment and labor income, water use by sector, so that includes ag, municipal users, dairies, manufacturing. And then it developed 5 future scenarios that were evaluated to tell us about the economic risk and opportunities that the county faces. So the report was lengthy and hard to understand. And I don't know if anybody's tried to read an economic report or kind of even talk to an economist. It's really hard. So we had them go back and put us into like a dumbed down kind of 10-page version, which came out to be a 15-page version that has some really helpful information on it. And that is readable by the normal human and is published on the county's website. They have a whole page dedicated to water. So if anybody does want to follow up on this, it is on their website. So it modeled these 5 future scenarios to see how different approaches would affect the county's economy through 2050. So scenario A, worst case, do nothing. 40,000 acre foot curtailment happen in 2029, and nothing is done to replace the lost supply. The economic output reaches just 4.56 billion by 2050. And so scenario B would add 10,000 acre feet via the South Fork River Diversion Project, so the Anderson Ranch Pump Station project that would come down through the old canal. And it helps, but just modestly. Scenario C would add 14,000 acre feet from the Snake River starting in 2032. And so that's the 20 CFS water right that the county is on the cusp of getting. It does drive better growth. And then C2 is the most impactful. It adds 50,000 acre feet a year from the Snake River So this would be, we had this scenario added, which is why it's C2, but this is bumping up that we got this 20 CFS water right. What if we go for another 70 or something? So this is early and substantial investment. It shows that early and substantial investment just results in the highest economic output and job creation, over 8 billion in GDP and 31,000 jobs. So clearly adding water to the region, and that would be, so 50,000 acre feet, we're 40,000 deficit. That's adding 10,000 acre feet per, or yeah, acre feet per year added to the economy. What that does, it's huge. So we need to focus on not just getting back to baseline to zero, and we need to grow the area. We need to be ready for Boise and Mountain Home to connect, is kind of seeming what's going to happen. Scenario D combines everything. So the Snake River, the Boise River, but because of some of the new water it comes later in 2045, just on how the projects would actually lay out, it slightly underperforms by 2050. So scenario 2, where we just really go after the Snake River water, is the best. As of now, the county is still going after the Snake River and Boise River water. So I want to take a closer look at scenario A, because that's what's happening now, and that's what's happening in other parts of the state, where we know there's problems in other areas. It's not just Elmore County. No one wants to spend the money on it. And so scenario A is modeling what happens if a curtailment occurs in 2029 and no new water supply is developed afterward. So this is nobody does anything, and there's a curtailment. The junior groundwater users lose access to 40,000 acre feet, and that loss isn't replaced by anything or mitigation efforts. By 2050, the economy still grows modestly, but compared to 2022, the output reaches 4.56 billion, and the jobs increase slightly to just under 16,000. Really not great numbers. Without additional water to support the ag and industrial growth or municipal expansion, the county just won't reach its potential. And on this path, it leaves Elmore County with, by 2050, 15,000 fewer jobs and 3.5 billion less in economic output. So by not doing anything, we're risking billions of dollars in just this one area, this one county. We've seen Elmore County's water crisis is serious now, but like I mentioned, it's not unique. In 2024, we had the Eastern Snake River Plain, the Magic Valley and Treasure Valleys both continue to see strain due to urban growth and ag demands, declining groundwater levels. And up north in the Palouse Basin, so this is Moscow, where the University of Idaho is, Pullman with Washington State, they both rely on an ancient confined aquifer. So in their case, they do not get recharge there. Their aquifer is confined. It's like a bottle that's all you get. And all their municipal water comes from that aquifer. It's been declining for decades. They know about it. University of Idaho studies it. I remember hearing about this stuff when I was there decades ago now, and still nothing has been done. They have formed a Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, and it's a very collaborative group. It's got scientists, it's got lawyers, it's got multi-state people, because Pullman and Moscow rely on the same thing. And Moscow is unique where they have an institution like Elmore County has the Air Force Base that Idaho doesn't want to let die. Moscow has the University of Idaho that the state doesn't want to let die. So they do have those things in their favor and to get attention. But really, the point is it's just groundwater scarcity is not isolated. And these economic impacts that we see in Elmore County would be rippled across the state if just one county fell. You can imagine if more counties started to fail. If cities can't produce water, home values dry up, businesses leave, and towns will die. So we really need to think big. We need to invest now. It requires this collaborative thinking, collaborative working together, because these decision makers that are in office now are making decisions at the generational level. They aren't making decisions for just what happens from 2050. They're making what happens 100 years from now. So that's in a nutshell. I tried to keep it semi-brief, but that's what I have for y'all. And so if anybody has questions, hopefully I didn't talk too fast, but I'd be happy to answer them.
Chris can maybe help answer it, but I know we did some hydrologic analysis for the guard out at the Orchard Training Range, and they also rely on or lie within those groundwater basins. Has that or have they entered the discussion at all?
Yeah, it's recognized. So the Elmore County went to what they started, the Idaho Department of Water Resources and USGS started a Treasure Valley groundwater model. And the county went to the state and said, hey, look, it's not just Treasure Valley. The aquifers are connected and you need to consider Mountain Home. And they agreed. And it was like $750,000 that the state put in to include Mountain Home in that. And so they did their first year of modeling and installing test wells and different measurements in existing wells and all kinds of stuff last year. And what they came back and said, look, we actually, this is bigger. We have the Eastern Snake River Plain aquifer model. We need a Western Snake River Plain aquifer model. And so we have kind of the hydrologic framework report from USGS was put out in January of this year that kind of gives some information on Mountain Home, but then they were like, oh man, this really is connected and it's going to go from Mountain Home all the way to Payette essentially. So it came out of that it's not just a Mountain Home problem, and the amount of stakeholders that this impacts is astronomical, and we need to do something about it. So yeah, it was recognized, and they're in the discussion as far as the modeling and how important and just like the base is important and our national security interests with the guard and the base. It's being talked about, but they haven't necessarily been approached to like, hey, you want to pitch in money. The county's kind of just taken that on with this in the state, but yeah, it's recognized as a stakeholder.
Going to get messy when you bring the whole western side in.
Yeah, I mean, it's already messy. In Elmore County and the Palousas case, like I mentioned, having those two institutions, we've seen what they'll do to save fighter jets out there. My big pitch is that, okay, you installed this pump station and pipeline and the water treatment plant's under construction now. That's great, but you guys can't sustain your base without the Mountain Home area. They don't have enough schools. They don't have enough housing. There's proposals in the recent month to bring 1,300 people in. They have no housing for them. The city can't expand. Their wastewater's at capacity. They drilled dry wells a couple years ago. So it's a multifaceted problem. The state and Air Force put in tens of millions of dollars that pump station and pipeline, but now we need to secure that investment with bringing more water into the area. So it sounds kind of corny to say, but it is kind of a matter of national security. And I fully believe that the state kind of got the area into this situation with over-appropriating the basin, and the state should help get out. And I've given that kind of pitch in a nice manner to the state, and they are getting on board. There's a lot of momentum, and I'll be presenting to some Air Force folks soon, a national meeting to talk about how it's all tied together. And then also the Water Resource Board has invited us to come talk to their finance committee. And it sounds like they're going to pitch in to get some engineering studies done so we can have alternatives, solid alternatives with costs to then present projects to have the state pitch in on. And then we have a unique funding source with the Air Force Base out there for some unique federal funding. And NRCS is really interested in funding stuff too. So there's some great momentum.
Well, great presentation, Carrie. Being a little bit of a water wonk myself, it's a fascinating subject that will never go away. And at least I could say with this group, the state of Idaho, it's not like we're the only ones in the West with this problem. Everyone in the West has this problem because of over-appropriation by those regulating agencies. So, so I just want to make that comment.
Yeah, it's everybody's over appropriated, and I think we aren't as bad off as some places, and we need to learn and learn quickly. It really also comes down to just money, and in Idaho for a long time, water has been considered a right and not a privilege, and it's very cheap, and it's been cheap for a long time. It's not going to be cheap anymore.
Carrie, this is Sarah. And when I worked out at the military, I assisted the USGS to do some groundwater level studies in those wells out there,
Nice.
knowing, that the levels were declining, and they just kind of wanted to start kind of tracking the data in those remote areas where, the guard doesn't use it like 100% of the time. But yeah, so this is interesting, and it was a very good presentation. It was very basic enough with enough detail that it was consumable. And I've even noticed here in Boise, I've lived here my whole life, like in my own house, like you used to be able to flush the toilet and take a shower, right, and not have any pressure drops, and we're experiencing pressure drops all of the time. So I recognize as a water professional that it is a limited resource, and it was just like, we have to promote water-wise landscaping or something in all of these residential areas. And it's just, I mean, they're kind of all connected. And so I'll be interested to see what happens in the mountain home area. We have a friend who's trying to sell 5 acres of property and to a developer. And I just wonder, what all of those ramifications are for those large parcels with one well. What can actually be done.
Yeah, they've tried to reform. In Idaho right now, you can go buy 5 acres and drill a well, and I can't remember off the top of my head how much water you get, but you can't be denied water. And 5 acres is a lot, and out there that it's impacting the aquifer with so many people just popping wells everywhere, and it's not managed, it's not recorded. You can pump as much as you want unmetered. So they're trying to get a hold on that, but then we get into private property rights in Idaho, and that's obviously a touchy subject. And I've participated in quite a few of these Treasure Valley groundwater, I don't know, conferences or summits or whatever they called. And it's land managers and federal agencies, state agencies, all kinds of people. And every time we come down to the fix and the control for, they call it like decorative landscaping, basically the decorative water use, all the stuff we see, like driving down Eagle Road or Meridian Road, and all these subdivisions, the outside of the subdivisions are watering this grass, and it's growing cattails near the road because they're just overwatering, and all that stuff. It all comes down to the county land use and city regulate or city ordinances for open space requirements and things like that. And then when we tried to take this back to the Elmore County commissioners, and they really didn't want to get into that and touch that, which is just kind of surprising that you can't fix the problem with like energy or water efficient shower heads or faucet. Like it's just a drop in the bucket for the real problem. But we could do it with landscaping and things and different to try to make an impact there and have some measurements on pumpers and get creative with how we use our surface water versus groundwater. And there is a priority to use surface water over groundwater, but that's part of Elmore County's battle is all Ada County needs the water and for their growth. And they want some of that Anderson Ranch Dam raised water and are looking to fight for it. But Ada County has more money to pay for it. And so we're gonna see some interesting battles for water between counties and where the beneficial use of the water really goes will be interesting versus who can bid the highest dollar for it.
Yeah, you're probably right. And, hopefully the Mountain Home Air Force Base and, if the tribe wanted to build a casino there, like that would have, I'm not going to say a balancing effect, but, maybe some sort of pull to kind of acknowledge from, Ada County that, our neighbors to the east are equally important to our own economic vitality. I mean, it would hurt my heart to see the corridor completely connected. So
I feel like it's going to happen. IT is already looking at the feasibility of expanding it to 3 lanes each side. And
I know.
that casino proposal looks like it's really on track. The governor is kind of the linchpin. And he basically said, I'd rather see a tribe with no casinos have 1 than a tribe with 3 casinos have 4. So yeah, that economic impact of just that casino in that area and the Mayfield Springs development that's happening and Micron's expansion, it's probably easier to drive from all the way from Mountain Home to go to work at Micron than it is to drive from Nampa. So we're in for it.
Yeah, Kara, as it relates to water, I think Mark Twain's got the best quote, which I'm sure you've heard numerous times. Whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting over.
We will see it for sure. Yep.
Well, then you're gonna have to stop drinking coffee. Do you know how much water it takes to produce? Anyway.
Yep. All these things. It'll just be a matter how much we want to pay for it. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.